So, Geoff, tell me any platforms you've invested in so far.
We've invested in 17 platforms.
17?
Of which 6 are UK-based. One, Andy Whelan from Sankers was on a panel earlier, is offshore. And then we've got a number of US platforms, three in Europe and one in sub-Saharan Africa.
And I think it's fair to say that along with possibly Balderton and Arrowgrass, and I suppose was a Blue Elephant in the States as well, but you're probably you've probably got the biggest portfolio of venture capital stakes in the alternative finance sector.
In terms of the number?
Numbers, yeah. Yeah, probably not in terms of value, maybe.
Yep.
Where are you as effectively a kind of venture capitalist, because you both put money on platform and in platform, so you've got a kind of hybrid experience. Where are you finding the biggest opportunities at the moment?
I think that the largest number of new opportunities is in Europe and in the US. I think in the UK, it's becoming quite a saturated market, and there are a number of specialist areas that could still be filled, but
such as
some areas where you can use technology in a smarter way to link up some kind of existing finance providers who've got a larger origination capability with platforms. But these are more niche opportunities. The mainstream UK is going to be very difficult if you're just going to be a me too to actually break into the market now, because there's people doing pretty much everything.
And is it true to say that you're finding a lot of opportunities in continental Europe and America as well, or is it again quite saturated?
No, I think in the US there's a lot that can be done and will be done in SME finance, and we only do SME finance.
Small business finance, yeah.
Yeah. In Europe, it's just opening up, and in fact, Etienne and I are both invested in one platform, and we've both looked at a number of others, some of which Etienne's invested in, some of which I've invested in.
Let's just look at the US first, and I'll come to you second, Etienne. Where in the US market, where do you think the most promising niches are? I mean, looking at your recent acquisitions, you've done a lot of stuff around small business funding, around trade finance, receivables finance. Is that symptomatic of where you think the opportunities are? I assume they are.
No, not entirely. I think there are a lot of opportunities at the short end in receivables, supply chain finance, invoice finance. However, one of the attractions of doing that, particularly in Europe, has been that clearly if you're building out at the short end to start with, then that gives you very high visibility as to what the actual results are, because you're getting the money back on a 3-month or 4-month basis. So you discover problems much quicker than if you're lending money on a 3 or 5 year basis. Right,
okay. And Cormac talks about what Basware as a good example of that in the receivables market. Etienne, in Europe, I think the numbers aren't very big at the moment in terms of platforms with big scalable amounts of money in Europe. I mean, there's Pret de Union and there's a few others. Are there interesting opportunities in Europe for put money into platforms?
As an equity investor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I sort of agree with Geoff that the time to do this was maybe 2 years ago, and now you have to be a little more creative. Geoff invests in SME lending platforms. We are agnostic. We think it's a sea change. So we will do consumer, we'll do SME, we'll do companies that are service providers to this industry.
Yeah, I was going to talk a bit about infrastructure in a second, but yeah.
There's a lot of different, I think, ways to play this trend, which is about bank disruption.
But where's the obvious opportunity in continental Europe at the moment?
There is no obvious opportunity.
Okay, fair enough.
What I would say is that if you just look at continental Europe, Southern Europe, Spain and Italy are clearly sort of 2 years behind Middle Europe, France and Germany, which is clearly 2 years behind Northern Europe, the UK. So, if I had to place bets, I would look at Spain and Italy.
Would you be placing bets in America?
It's a very crowded market. And again, as Geoff said, you have to be very much more creative because I think most of the obvious plays have been made, but there's some stuff going on in ancillary businesses that are around this industry that I think will be recognized in a year or two.
Well, I'll come back to the ancillary kind of infrastructure bit just in the next question. But in the first one, let's look at the other end, about creating consumer brands. Sort of refers to my earlier question to some of the early guys about whether or not the first pioneers are the guys who are going to be around in 5 or 10 years' time. Is it basically too late to build a consumer-orientated brand in the alternative finance space? Is it going to cost too much money? I mean, Prosper and Lending Club, Zopa and RateSetter in the UK, to varying degrees are spending quite a bit of money on marketing. Is it basically just too expensive and too late and you shouldn't really bother?
It's never too late to build a brand. I mean, to suggest that you cannot get into a space because there are already brands there would mean that you wouldn't have been able to build any of the new brands that you've seen in banking or insurance over the last 10 years. There's businesses that have come from nowhere.
Yeah.
So it's perfectly possible to build a brand.
But how much is it going to cost?
It's not going to come cheap, and you can only really do it if you're going to do mainstream lending. And the key, I think, is what your strategy is. We focus on more niche businesses that, frankly, we'd never want them spending vast amounts on brand building. But if you want to build a mainstream consumer business, clearly that's an essential part of it.
Etienne, I mean, again, Europe particularly might be an opportunity because you said underdeveloped national marketplaces. So in some of the Europe, there's no Zopa or RateSetter as in the UK or Prosper Lending Club as in America. The opportunity's there, or is it not really there?
No, it's there. It's there. You just have to have the capital. And amazingly, as much as people are throwing capital at new platforms in the US, it's incredibly difficult if you're a platform in Spain, for instance, to raise $1 million. And yet it's a 50 million person market which has just gone through a horrendous banking crisis. So you would think that people would be looking at it. So I think you still can build a brand in certain markets.
The ancillary opportunity, because I am, like you guys, interested in that. So where is it? What is it? What should you possibly be looking to put your money in? IT companies that help the sector, or credit algorithms, or what? I mean, where's this ancillary opportunity? The infrastructure behind the sector.
I think that there is certainly some technology opportunities in doing the more complex stuff of linking up various different systems, which I can see conceptually, although would have no idea how it works at all. But there are certainly opportunities there. I think there's also opportunities linking up more of the conventional finance providers who've got enormous amounts of origination capability.
Yeah, I was going to ask
that they don't necessarily want to actually fund the capital themselves anymore, and rather than selling or closing the business, they could actually work with a platform to actually get somebody else to provide the funding for the business. And
to your knowledge, is anybody actually doing that? Or you've had concrete discussions with anybody doing that opportunity?
We've had discussions, but none of them have actually got beyond a conceptual stage at the moment. I think a lot of traditional finance providers can see conceptually how this makes sense. They haven't crossed the Rubicon to actually get to the point of how do we execute this.
Etienne, do you think the big European banks might be interested in doing deals with some of the alternative finance platforms, like maybe some of the smaller American banks?
Yeah, I think they will. I was telling somebody I think the best trade in this business right now is to own a bank and be buying these loans, because you have zero cost of funds, and somebody else is doing all the origination and the credit work for you. So if I had the capital, I would buy a bank. I would buy a bank, and I would buy loans from Giles and Renault and Ron, and that would be a very, very nice equity return.
Well, that's what Eddie and Danny Truell have done with Tungsten, which is an invoice fundable. They bought a bank, haven't they? Last question for you, Geoff. So does that mean you're going to buy a bank then?
I think conceptually I can see that it makes sense. We do have one or two other things on with trying to grow 17 different platforms at the same time. So let's leave that one for next year.
Okay, next year. Okay, I'll keep you to that. Okay, thank you very much, and that's it before the lunch.